stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 37th floor, gazing down at the city stretched out beneath her like a living, breathing circuit board. From this altitude, everything appeared miniature, orderly, and manageable. Cars inched along the grid of downtown avenues like glossy, silent beetles. People were mere specks of color shifting on the sidewalks. And problems were supposed to stay down there, lost in the concrete canyons. But not today. Today, a problem had ridden the express elevator up to her sanctuary and was now sitting in her reception area, waiting for the assistant to usher it in. The world outside the glass was a postcard of control, but the world inside her chest felt suddenly, perilously small. "Ms. Vance?" Her assistant's voice was a careful, calibrated instrument filtered through the intercom. Delicate, yet tinged with a confusion Alina couldn't quite mask. In her 4 years managing this office, she had never once had to announce a visit from family. "Your parents are here." "I know. Give me 5 minutes, please." Natalie turned from the impressive, indifferent skyline. Her desk was a monument to precision, a slate of polished, dark wood where every document, every pen lay in exact alignment. She adjusted a folder that didn't need adjusting, her fingers tracing its sharp edge. A deep, deliberate breath filled her lungs, held for a count of 4, then released. She had mastered the art of emotional containment as a child, learning early that tears were a currency no one in her world wished to spend. They didn't change outcomes, they only made you vulnerable. Parents. The word still carried a faint, phantom ache, a sensation like a sliver of glass lodged just beneath her ribs, forgotten until she moved a certain way. She hadn't been angry with them for years, not really. On an intellectual level, she understood. They had done their best with the blueprint they'd been given, making choices that seemed right within the cramped confines of their own disappointments. But understanding is a cold companion. It doesn't erase the memory of certain words, certain looks, certain kinds of silence. Her story, she often thought, began not at her birth, but in the reluctant decisions that preceded it. Her mother had shared the origin tale only a handful of times, always on occasions lubricated by a second glass of Chardonnay, a family reunion, a birthday, when her usual defenses softened and her gaze grew distant. "Your father and I never planned to get married," she'd say, her eyes avoiding Natalie's, focusing on some middle distance in the past. "We were just dating. I was in college, studying to be an English teacher. He was working at the auto plant, talking about going back to school someday. And then I was pregnant. My mother said it would be a scandal if we didn't make it official, so we had a courthouse wedding. 20 people, a sheet cake, and cheap sparkling wine. I wouldn't call us happy." Natalie remembered the apartment of her early childhood with a sensory clarity that time couldn't blur. A Soviet-era block on the far edge of the city, its walls thin, its ceilings oppressively low. A perpetual state of not enough space, not enough money, not enough quiet. Her father worked double shifts, his presence a ghost of fatigue and cigarette smoke. Her mother took on tutoring jobs and cleaned offices at night. The financial anxiety was a third, silent occupant, whispering through the cracks in the plaster at night. She remembered the hushed, tense conversations leaking from the kitchen after midnight, the sound of her mother's stifled crying, the definitive slam of the front door. "You know, I never finished my degree because of you," her mother had remarked once when Natalie was around 9. It wasn't said with malice, but with a flat, weary finality, as if stating the sky was gray. "Had to drop out in my 3rd year. We needed the money." Those words had landed like a physical blow, a branding iron on a young soul. She didn't fully grasp their weight then, but she memorized their shape. Years later, she would analyze them. She was the unplanned variable, the child who had rerouted 2 lives onto a harder, narrower path. Her parents, bound by duty rather than passion, had traded their individual dreams for a shared responsibility. Education was sacrificed on the altar of necessity. It was a hard season of life. But time, as it does, shifted circumstances. Her father got a promotion to a foreman position. Her mother secured a stable clerical job at the same plant. They managed to trade their 2-room apartment for a 3-bedroom unit in a slightly better neighborhood. Natalie was 11. And that was precisely when Alicia arrived. The second daughter was wanted, planned for, an event marked by preparation and open-hearted hope. They painted a nursery a soft yellow, accumulated a small mountain of stuffed animals, debated names for months. When Alicia was born, it was as if a sun had broken through their perpetual overcast. Natalie watched her father spend hours pushing the stroller through the park, with a pride she didn't recognize. She heard her mother sing lullabies in a voice brimming with a tenderness reserved for this new life. They gazed at Alicia with a naked adoration they had never bestowed upon their firstborn. "Let her have everything we couldn't," her father would say, his calloused hand brushing the baby's cheek. "Let her get an education, become someone, we'll make sure of it." And they did. Alicia was enrolled in music lessons, then junior tennis clinics, then language immersion programs. She had brand-name clothes, the newest toys, shelves of bright storybooks. To Natalie, they offered a different refrain. "You're the older one, you understand. Things are tight for both of you." Natalie understood. She became a master of silence, of making herself small and useful. She learned to cook simple meals after school, to scrub floors, to watch over Alicia while her parents worked. By 14, she was essentially running the household, a tiny, efficient CEO of domestic logistics. Help your sister with her homework, get dinner started, run to the store. These were not requests, they were the architecture of her role, the sum total of the attention she received. Alicia, meanwhile, was nurtured in the warm light of indulgence. She got new dresses for school pictures while Natalie wore hand-me-downs. Alicia could stay out with friends. Natalie had a strict, early curfew. Alicia blossomed in a greenhouse of affection, while Natalie grew in the shade, sturdy and resilient out of sheer necessity. A deep, quiet fury took root in the older sister's heart. It began as a child's bewildered hurt. Why is it different for her? Why do their eyes light up for her and only grow tired for me? The hurt, unacknowledged and untended, slowly calcified into a cold, driving rage. And that rage, she would later realize, became her fuel. It was the engine that propelled her forward when nothing else would. "I'll show you," she would think, hunched over textbooks long after midnight, listening to the muffled sounds of bedtime stories being read to Alicia in the next room. "I'll show all of you what I'm made of." She excelled academically, not for the love of learning, but because grades were her ticket, her leverage, her only visible form of merit. A gold medal at graduation, a full scholarship to a top-tier university, a degree with highest honors. She seized each accolade through sheer, solitary force of will. Her parents attended her university commencement, beaming at their acquaintances. "That's our eldest," her father heard say, chest puffed with a pride that felt years too late. Natalie smiled a tight, practiced smile and thought, where was this pride when I was terrified before finals? Where were the words of encouragement when I felt completely alone? She landed a competitive job at a multinational firm. She worked 12-hour days, volunteered for extra projects, never refused a business trip. She climbed the corporate ladder with the grim, focused determination of a rock climber with no safety net. Department head by 29, regional director by 33, vice president of the Western Division by 36. And Alicia grew up beautiful, charming, and utterly unequipped for reality. She floated in and out of community college. She worked briefly at a boutique, then a spa, Then not at all. She cycled through boyfriends, spent lavishly on clothes and nights out, and her primary occupation seemed to be presenting her parents with a rotating menu of needs. Mom, this makeup artistry certification is only $2,000. Dad, all my friends are going to Cabo. I need a vacation. I can't be seen in this coat another season. It's practically vintage. And her parents, her wonderful, enabling parents, provided. They skimped on their own needs, deferred repairs on their aging car, but they found a way. Because Alicia was their golden child, their late-in-life miracle, their beloved project, who stubbornly refused to launch. Natalie observed this from a distance. She had long since moved into her own sleek apartment, built her own life, constructed a fortress of professional success. She saw her parents on obligatory holidays, presented them with expensive, impersonal gifts, and maintained a careful, polite detachment. Not icy, but not warm. It was the emotional equivalent of a formal handshake. She had forgiven them, she believed, but forgiveness is not the same as closeness, and that bridge had never been built. The enabling continued. As Alicia matured, her desires simply grew more expensive. She had been raised to receive, and she saw no reason to stop. When Alicia turned 27, she announced she wanted her own apartment. "I can't live with you guys forever," she declared over a Sunday dinner Natalie had reluctantly attended. "I need my own space, my own place." Natalie had bitten her tongue, but the thought screamed in her head. At 27, you expect them to buy you an apartment? Is this real life? Her parents, however, nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable next step in the parenting manual. "Of course, sweetheart," her mother had said, patting Alicia's hand. "We'll figure something out." And they did. They sold the comfortable 3-bedroom home they'd worked decades to own and executed a brutal downsizing. For themselves, they purchased a cramped, gloomy 1-bedroom in a decaying neighborhood on the city's forgotten South Side, a building with a temperamental elevator and a view of warehouse rooftops. With the remaining equity, they bought Alicia a stylish, renovated studio in the vibrant heart of the downtown district, complete with stainless steel appliances and a rooftop terrace. When Natalie learned of this transaction, she could only stare at her phone in stunned disbelief after the call ended. "You're joking," she had said flatly to her mother when she called back for confirmation. "What choice did we have?" her mother had replied, her voice a fragile mix of defense and resignation. "She needed it. It's important for a young person." "And what do you need?" "We'll manage. We don't need much anymore." Natalie ended the call. Arguing was a futile expenditure of energy. They had made their choice, as they always had, and she was not part of the equation. 2 years drifted by. Through the faint grapevine of old family friends, Natalie heard snippets. Alicia was doing well, always posting pictures from trendy brunch spots and yoga retreats. Whether she held a steady job was unclear. Her parents saw her infrequently. The crosstown journey was difficult for them. Then her father got sick. It started with fatigue, a lingering cough he couldn't shake. Then came the shortness of breath, the pains that his stoic nature could no longer ignore. Doctors puzzled, tests were run, and finally a diagnosis emerged: a complex cardiac issue. He needed surgery, specialized, expensive surgery. The wait for the state-covered procedure was 9 months, time he didn't have. The private option carried a staggering price tag. Her parents scrambled. They sold the small lakeside cabin they'd saved a decade to buy. They took out second and third mortgages, begged loans from dwindling circles of friends. It wasn't enough. They went ahead with the surgery. He survived, but the aftermath was a long, expensive road of rehabilitation, medications, and specialist visits. They were buried in debt. Their pensions were meager. Half went to pharmaceuticals, another third to servicing loans. Natalie discovered the full extent of the crisis by accident from a former neighbor who happened to mention it in passing. "Why didn't you tell me?" Natalie demanded, standing in the doorway of their dim, stuffy apartment. They sat side by side on a worn-out sofa that seemed to swallow them. Her father looked hollowed out, aged a decade in a year. Her mother was a bundle of frayed nerves. "We didn't want to be a burden," her mother whispered, not meeting her eyes. "You work so hard." "And Alicia?" Her mother's gaze dropped to her hands, twisting a tissue. "Alicia, she's going through a difficult time herself." Natalie let out a short, humorless laugh. "A difficult time? She lives in a downtown studio you bought her." "She has expenses," her mother said weakly. "The condo fees, her lifestyle. She can't manage it." Natalie held her tongue. A scream boiled inside her. "And I could? When was I ever asked if I could manage?" But she didn't give it voice. Instead, she opened the banking app on her phone, her movements sharp and precise. "How much do you need?" "Natalie, please, we can't ask you to." "How much?" She cleared the debts, all of them. She set up an automated transfer for medications and arranged for a grocery delivery service. She hired a part-time home health aide to help her father with his exercises. "Thank you, darling," her mother wept, clutching her in a frail embrace. "Thank you." Natalie stood stiffly, her face a mask. She didn't help out of love, nor even out of a deep sense of filial duty. She helped because she could, because she had built the resources to do so, and because, despite everything, they were her parents. But the transaction brought no peace. 6 months passed. Her father improved, gaining back some strength, beginning to walk with a cane. Natalie called intermittently, transferred funds, managed the logistics from a distance. It was an obligation, cleanly executed, not a relationship. And now they were in her office. Natalie squared her shoulders, smoothed the non-existent wrinkle from her tailored skirt, and gave a single, sharp nod toward the door. "Send them in." They entered like intruders in a sacred space, hesitant and out of place. Her father leaned heavily on a polished cane she'd never seen before. Her mother clutched a faded fabric tote bag. In the vast, minimalist expanse of her office, all clean lines, glass, and silent technology, they looked shrunken like relics from another world. "Please sit," Natalie said, gesturing to the pair of austere chairs facing her desk. "Natalie, honey, we know you're very busy," her mother began, her fingers worrying the strap of her bag. "We won't take much of your time." "Go ahead." "You see," her mother faltered, looking to her husband for support that didn't come, "there's another problem with your father." Natalie laced her fingers together on the cool desktop, a picture of composed expectation. "The doctors, they say he needs another procedure, a follow-up surgery. They say without it, well, it's necessary, it's quite costly. We've tried everything, but the banks—" "How much?" "Almost 60,000, her mother's voice cracked on the number. "We know it's an enormous amount. We'd pay you back somehow, we promise." "And Alicia?" The silence that followed was thick, almost solid. "Alicia," her mother's eyes darted to her father, who studied the intricate pattern of the rug. "We spoke to her." "And?" She said she doesn't have that kind of money, that things are very tight for her right now. She just leased a new car, the payments are—" "A new car," Natalie repeated, the words slow and deliberate. "I see." She rose and walked back to the window, her back to them. The city pulsed below, a magnificent, uncaring machine. $60,000. To her, it was a number, a significant one, but a number she could move between accounts with a few keystrokes. It represented less than 6 weeks of her post-tax income. She could solve this, right now, with a gesture. but something deep within her coiled tight, a spring of decades-old resentment compressed to its breaking point. "Tell me something," she said, her voice dangerously calm as she turned to face them. "Why are you here? With me?"
"Natalie, you've done so well. You have the means." "Why are you here with me?" she repeated, her volume rising, cutting through the sterile air. "You have a daughter, a beloved daughter, the one you gifted an apartment, the one you indulged every whim of, the one you poured all your hope into, the one you sacrificed your own comfort for. Why isn't she sitting here with you? Why isn't she selling her new car?" "Natalie, please, don't." "No." The word erupted, a dam breaking. Years of suppressed hurt, of quiet acceptance, of swallowed words came flooding out in a torrent. "No, I want to hear you say it. Why come to me? Your perfect daughter lives in a condo you paid for, in the neighborhood you wanted for her, while you're in that depressing little box on the south side. She drives a car she can't afford, that she could sell, and you come to me." "Sweetheart, calm down. Don't call me that." Her voice rang with a metallic fury. "She's your sweetheart. I was the girl who cooked dinner and mopped the floors. I was the one you remembered when you needed something done. Where were you when I was struggling, when I was studying for exams alone, hunting for jobs alone, fighting for every inch of what I have, alone?" Her mother was crying now, silent tears tracking through her powder. Her father sat shrunken in his chair, his face a map of shame and defeat. We thought you were strong," he finally said, his voice a dry leaf rustle. "We thought you could handle anything on your own. But Alicia, she's always been so sensitive, so spoiled, so self-centered, so utterly incapable of standing on her own 2 feet. We were trying to do what was right," her mother whispered into her hands. "We tried our best." "Your best?" Natalie's laugh was a brittle, shattered thing. "Your best was to turn one daughter into a servant and the other into a helpless princess. Congratulations, it worked brilliantly. And now that the princess has declined to help, you've come knocking on the servant's door." "Natalie, we know we were wrong," her father said, attempting to rise but falling back, his strength gone. "We know that now. Forgive us. But this surgery, I won't see next summer without it." A heavy, humming silence descended, filled only with the faint hum of the HVAC system. Natalie stood rooted, feeling the tectonic plates of her past and present grinding against each other inside her. The ancient, righteous anger warred with something else. Not love, not pity. Perhaps it was a grim acknowledgement that these 2 broken, elderly people were her only tangible link to family, and that after them, only Alicia would remain, a stranger who shared her DNA. She walked back to her desk, picked up her phone. Her fingers moved with a swift surgical precision. Amount, account, memo, medical, send. "The transfer is done. It will cover the surgery and the initial recovery. Don't come to me again." "Natalie, dear." "I said, don't come to me again." Her voice was flat, drained of all emotion. "I will help with this because I don't want my father's death on my conscience, but I don't want to see you, any of you, not you, and certainly not Alicia. I am tired of being the backup plan. I am exhausted from being the person you turn to when there's literally nowhere else to go." "We'll pay you back," her father murmured, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Every penny." "Don't." She turned her back to them, facing the infinite city once more. "Alina will see you out." When the door clicked shut behind them, the fortified silence of her office rushed back in. Natalie sank into her chair. A fine tremor ran through her hands. Her chest felt simultaneously cavernous and crushed by a terrible weight. "You did the right thing," she told herself firmly. "You helped because you were able, because you had the strength to build a life that allowed for such gestures. Because you are not like Alicia, who only knows how to take." Then why did it feel so much like a defeat? Her phone buzzed softly on the desk. A text notification glowed on the screen. From her mother. "Thank you. For everything. Please forgive us. We love you." Natalie stared at the words until they blurred into meaningless shapes. Down below, the city continued its relentless, indifferent march. Traffic flowed, lights winked on in thousands of windows, countless stories played out unseen. She had forgiven them long ago, she realized. True forgiveness, however, doesn't rebuild what was never constructed. It doesn't fill the empty spaces of a childhood spent in emotional solitude. Some chapters, once written, cannot be revised. Some roads, once taken, have no return route. Natalie drew a slow breath, wiped a single traitorous tear from the corner of her eye with a precise knuckle, and straightened her spine. She pulled her laptop toward her. A senior leadership briefing in 50 minutes. A major project presentation tonight. The world of spreadsheets and strategies waited, predictable and demanding. Life, relentless and procedural, went on. It always did. She would handle it. She always had. Alone. Hey everyone, if these kinds of deeply human, complex family stories resonate with you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more thought-provoking narratives like this one. And I'm genuinely curious, what would you have done in Natalie's position? Would you have sent the money, or would you have drawn a harder line? Let's discuss it in the comments below. Disclaimer: this is a work of fiction. All names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.